Whoa, it's Genevieve and Dave.
I know, back together.
Can you believe it? That GD show. It's just been half and half for the last month, right?
I know, it's either been a D or a G, but not both. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've recovered from the jet lag of dealing with a little head cold, a little dragging a little bit, but okay. I was looking at the chat. We've got people from Hong Kong, Australia, and Kansas City already in here tonight.
I love that, the exotic Kansas City.
I know, right? How you, Genevieve?
I'm good. I'm really good. I've just been so giddy and happy to see you again and
I know,
hear
I
all
know.
about your trip. But I know that we
I've
have like a
missed you.
guest and a show to do.
Yeah, but I do want to talk about that just a minute. Most folks know that Bevan and I were in Europe, Italy and Greece for a couple of weeks, and that trip was amazing. It's one that we've been trying to get to for several years, and we kept getting blocked. And this wonderful organization called HARK, HARK, sponsored that. They actually paid to send us on that trip. It's an organization that helps people with ALS have these bucket list experiences, kind of like Make-A-Wish. And we're going to talk more about that in an upcoming show. And I talked to you about this, but we're going to, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a show that kind of goes behind the scenes with our life with ALS and giving people a little bit of a glimpse of what we're dealing with and what we have coming up and that sort of thing. But I want to say thanks to HARK and the people there. That trip would not have been possible without their generous support. And so that's something I wanted to say right out of the gate. Prior to that, we were in Nashville, NanoCon, speaking at a conference there. It seems like forever ago because it has been forever ago.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So we did that, and that was really super cool. Actually leaving this weekend to go to a conference in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada, to speak at another conference. Really looking forward to that. But we've had a little bit of a break here. Hey, Greg Markowski, our super faithful 1999 super chat. Welcome back, Dave. We had some fun shows without you, but probably not as much fun as you had in Europe. I did watch the shows back, and you guys had a great time. Our first 2+ hour show, I see.
I know. I was being selfish. When you have the chance to talk to Holy Kool-Aid and Forrest Valkai at the same time, you can't let them go so easily.
You can't. Two strong personalities, but it was a great show, and I hated to miss that. But good job, Genevieve. You guys rocked it out. Speaking of the conference at NanoCon, we did. Because we're asking, we always want to mention to like and subscribe. We're just a few subscribers short of 4,000. So our little channel is growing. So if you haven't subscribed yet, what the hell? Come on, get that subscription going and get all your neighbors. Just go up and down your street and ask people to subscribe to that GD show. Mm-hmm. And I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Or do it. I don't care.
I was going to say just pull a Marjorie Taylor Greene and just make all of the email accounts that you can, and then just like keep subscribing.
Yeah, just do that. But that talk that I gave at NanoCon is on if you're a Patreon supporter, which we really appreciate your support. If you can, one way to support what we do with Dying Out Loud is to become a Patreon supporter. You can do that for as little as $1 a month. We had Bevan posted the video of that talk at Nashville on the Patreon channel. So if the Patreon supporters are getting a sneak peek at it, I think it will be out in days to come, and everyone can see it. It was probably my most personal talk that I've given this year. And of course, Genevieve, I cried. How I am. But again, thank you for Patreon supporters and all that you guys do to support us. Speaking of that, Anton Gomez from Mexico, $40 super sticker. Thank you for that. You guys are great. By the way, if you don't get to watch the show live, and I know that some people used to, but the time change prohibits that, there is now a way to support us in the comments. It's called a super thanks. And you can send a comment to the show if you watch it later and support us that way. So that's, I kind of hate talking about that so much, but it is important because that is something that we rely on to get to do what we do here and the traveling and speaking that we do and all those things. So like, subscribe, Patreon, all those things. Anything else, Genevieve, that we need to? Oh, it's a call-in show.
You took the words out of my mouth. It is a call-in show. So if you want to talk to me and Dave and our very special guest, you can just call the number on your screen. It is 217-375-9933. I don't think I forgot anything else except for might as well say thank you so much, Kim Possible. $6.66, another faithful super chat. NanoCon was great. Your speech was great, Dave, especially when you were talking like a mouse. LOL. And I got to meet Holy Kool-Aid there too. That's very exciting.
Yeah, I was choking up in my voice. Got that like that. Yeah, so that's what she's talking about.
I do have one last comment to highlight as well before we get the show on the road, and it is from DD 1965. Dave, I just finished your new book. I was truly touched with your journey, and you have played a huge role in my road to reason.
That's awesome. Thank you. That means so much. I appreciate that. It really does. I never get tired of hearing that because when you tell your story, you hope it makes a difference to someone. Speaking of the book, the trivia contest, I want to get, before I forget that, you did a great job of remembering that. By the way, whoever got the first one, we need to, if you got the answer correct,
yes,
you need to send me a message with your address so we can send you that GD show mug.
Yes, I believe the winner was Ironclad Alibi.
Okay.
Since I am 99% sure, if it was not Ironclad Alibi, I will get you a mug if I misspoke.
Anyway, that's what you win with the trivia contest. So the question tonight is from my memoir, and it's a two-part answer. So you guys are getting these too easily. We're giving a ton of mugs away, which is fine. We want to. Where did Dave, young Dave, where did I see the play, the musical Godspell? And it needs to be the theater and the city wherein the theater was located. Where did I see the movie Godspell? Not the movie, but the play, the musical. So if you know that answer, the first one to put it in the chat correctly will win that GD Show coffee mug. Darren Wright, $9.99. So glad to see the band back together. So glad you got to check something off your bucket list. Thank you, Darren. Love y'all. Keep on rolling and carpe the fucking diem. That is our motto. Okay, we have chit-chatted long enough. I am really excited about our guest tonight. I'm super pumped about talking about all these things that he has all the answers to. Without further ado, please welcome our special guest, Phil Zuckerman. Phil!
Greetings.
Hey, brother.
That was fun.
Oh, well, sorry for all that chit-chat. We had a lot to catch up on.
I love a lot. Really warm, really nice, awesome.
We do have a really our show's like a big family. We have a lot of regular viewers that come in here each week and hang out with us, and we talk about all these things, and we have these amazing guests. Hopefully we'll get a phone call or two. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But at any rate, we just want to have a conversation with you about all the things.
Sounds good.
Now, you, as I read a little bit about you on your Wikipedia, and I knew enough about you to kind of have a pretty good idea of what you're about and who you are and what you've been up to. but it says that you were basically a secular Jew in terms of your background. Did you ever identify as any kind of religious and have a faith of some sort?
I tried praying to Pan when I was a kid. Like I got this book, Delare's Book of Greek Myths. I don't know, maybe you've seen it. I loved it and I pored over it and I read all the stories. It's an illustrated book for children on the Greek gods and goddesses. And Hermes was really cool to me. And then Pan just blew me away. He had, half man, half goat, played the pan pipes, had horns. And so I remember we were like family camping up in the Sierras in Northern California. And I remember just really trying to pray to Pan and those woods. Come on, I'll be your follower. Didn't work, but I was ready.
Really?
Otherwise, yeah, secular Jew, the best kind out there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm a third generation non-believer. There's different ways to be religious. Sometimes it's a matter of ritual. Sometimes it's a matter of community. Sometimes it's a matter of just identity. But sometimes it's a matter of faith and supernatural things. So I never had that latter part. I definitely had the communal immersion. I was very involved in the Jewish community in many ways. I spent my summers in an Episcopalian summer camp, which was pretty awesome.
Wow.
Had a blast. But all four of my grandparents were non-believers. They were all immigrants or refugees. Two were kind of hardcore, uneducated, working class socialists who thought religion was part of the problem. And two were upper middle class, well-educated, who simply just were more interested in literature and music and film than religion per se. So then came my parents, both non-believers. Again, my dad, like a hardcore atheist. My mom just interested in other things like going to the beach. And then me. And I'm so I'm a third generation non-believer.
Wow. Good for you. I envy you.
There's something to that. And normally I would try to be humble and say we all have our struggles, but I've interviewed so many strong religious folks, many who it's a wonderful, vital, uplifting part of their life, but many who it's just the damage. And I did feel like I avoided a lot of damage that is just unfathomable to me. The damage around fear of hell and Satan is just unfathomable to me. And I've talked to some people that I think were really, really damaged by that, among other things. But so, yeah.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Religious trauma syndrome is a real thing. And the space that I work in is with people like myself who spent years in some form of evangelicalism, fundamentalism, ideologies that really are damaging, that teach you from a young age that you are broken and shameful and evil and wicked and need a savior to save you. And if you don't get saved, you could spend your eternity in hell. Those thoughts get embedded in little children, and it is really hard for many of them to get free from that kind of damage.
And there's not enough discussion of that. There's not enough research on it. It's just not talked about. It's almost like everybody just accepts that kids need religion because where else are they going to get their morals? And
Exactly.
No one talks about the damage and danger that it can potentially. Again, there's progressive religion and there's dogmatic. I don't want to paint religion all with one brush, but there are certain versions of religion that are child abuse, straight up.
Yeah. And we have no problem calling it that.
Okay.
And I differentiate. I try to, as much as possible when I'm talking about religion, to what you just said, to draw a distinction between the fundamentalist evangelical stripe, which is damaging, and the more the benign Episcopal light kind of stuff that really isn't trying to impose itself on people, is not trying to force ideologies and dogmas onto people, and is not presenting them with the fear of hell or anything like that. So
that's right.
There's a big distinction between those two. Now, like yourself, Genevieve here didn't have to deal with any of that. She was also a cradle atheist.
I'm like a second and a half generation. I have like one atheistic grandparent, and then the rest are Buddhist and like fake Catholics. So my parents were very much not religious. It was definitely a culture shock moving from California to the Bible Belt and suddenly being surrounded by this thing that it was truly foreign.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Indeed.
So, Phil, what got you interested in this? I mean, coming out of your secular world, you studied and got degrees in sociology, and you teach sociology and secular studies in Claremont, California. So your focus is on, and I'm going to talk more about your books and the things you've written about morality and secular society in specific. What got your mind? Why did you feel? What was driving you to get into those topics as a completely secular person? It's oftentimes someone who has come from religion that wants to delve into that.
Yeah, I think you're right. In fact, you know, when you're in a very strongly religious social context or community or family and you don't feel that religiosity, then religion is something you have to contend with and deal with and fight against, and it becomes a much bigger issue. When you're living in a society or culture context where people aren't religious, it just becomes a non-issue. And I would say for the vast majority of my friends, I grew up in Southern California near Santa Monica, near the beach. I was born in 1969. I grew up in the 70s. There just was not a lot of religion around. And by that, I mean, like, I never knew anybody that prayed, at bedtime. Or, I mean, I slept over at everybody's house. That was the best thing to do on the weekend. No, I never saw somebody say prayers at the dinner time. I never had a teacher tell me about their missionary trip or their good service they're doing in Africa or Mexico. The only thing that was different was that on Sunday mornings, there was no good cartoons. That was like that, and then you had to watch this claymation called David and Goliath.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember?
Oh my God,
Davy! And it was very, you're like, well, that's the best. It's either that or Robert Schuller's, Crystal Cathedral. So you're right. And the truth is, growing up, I didn't know a lot of religious people, and I actually thought religion was something from the old days. I thought that was if you talk to me about religion, I thought Salem witch trials. And unlike my other friends and cousins and neighbors, when I first started encountering strong religiosity, I was freaked out and almost obsessed by it. Like I wasn't, I was like, and I remember most clearly was my first serious girlfriend. I was 15, she was 16. Her dad was an evangelical non-denominational preacher who came from either Kansas or Oklahoma, I can't remember which, to save the heathen in LA. Very nice man, very actually not what I would have thought, like very bookish, bespectacled, calm. He wasn't like a fire and brimstone guy. He was a thoughtful, sweet man. And I was at their house a lot. And I remember I went to church with them for the first time. I was, they're like, do you want to come to church? And I was like, sure, I'm curious. Are they going to play, pin up the Jew or what? Like, I'll be there. So I go to this non-denominational service in this big warehouse. It wasn't even in a church per se. I didn't even understand about that. It's kind of a nondescript building, and you walk in, and I was sort of like scared, dumbstruck, like the things that what I remember specifically, and I've written about this, but I remember specifically they called up a young couple that was weeping, and they had a tiny infant in their arms. And my girlfriend's father proceeded to explain that their child was born with a heart defect and was probably going to die in a matter of days. And could we all pray? Now, on the one hand, it was moving, and I was moved, and everybody was channeling their energy. And I thought, wow, here's 300 strangers, or, from the most part, pouring their love and hope on these people. But I'm sort of scratching my head going like, wait, they think there's a magical being who's like getting mental email, or like, and if they pray hard enough, he'll cure this baby's heart. But if they don't pray hard enough, he won't. And doesn't this magical being already know that the kid like, none of it made sense. I almost felt like, am I crazy? Like, so I remember coming home that night and talking to my girlfriend, who, by the way, was just as sexually active as anybody and just as drinking and drugs. I mean, not to give too much information, but there was nothing about her behavior that would have led me to believe. So I thought, wow, you really, could you believe that? And she was like, oh, I believe the power of prayer. And I'm like, go on. And then she started talking about the end times. And I'm like, like, what the fuck? Like, if you've never heard this stuff,
right?
This is an intelligent person in high school that I'm in front. I'm like, is this a fucking joke? Like Omar the Purple Dragon with magic teacups? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? But she was dead serious. And I was like, this is a nice, smart young woman who's claims to believe this. And for me, this became an obsession. So whereas other people might have been like, well, that's cool, let's talk about something else or whatever. I was like, so I was fascinated by religion, a little bit scared by it, I'll be honest, a little freaked out by it, and wanted to understand it more and more. And that kind of led me to study religion. In high school, I was studying it. In college, I was studying it. And it was only, I'm almost done with my rant. It was only, and then in grad school, you could study you could study the history of religion, the philosophy of religion, sociology, anthropology, psychology. Like, it's a huge field. And
it is.
So, like, it ought to be. Like, it's a big part of human civilization. But when I started working as a young professor here in Claremont, that's when we started getting this data on more and more people saying they were non-religious. I remember in 2001, front page USA Today, like 14% of Americans don't identify with a religion. This was front page news. Now it's, of course, over 30%, depending on but at that time. And I was suddenly like, wow, this is news. I was raised secular. My community was secular. No one's talking about this in academia. There's no anthropologist studying secular culture. There's no psychologist studying the psychology of secularity. There's no, historians studying the history of atheism, agnosticism, humanism. I shouldn't say no, but it was a trickle. And that's when I suddenly said, wow, there's a lot to learn here. And there's a lot of myth busting. There's so many stereotypes about non-religious people. And I just saw this as a wide open field. So ever since then, I've been studying secular culture, secular people, secular society. And I'm not the only one. Now it's a exploding discipline.
Interesting. So you basically studied it as a sociologist, looking at it to try to understand what was going on here. What are these people thinking? I mean, almost like an alien visiting our planet and trying to figure out what are these people. I love your description of hearing these things, which to me, growing up in that, not growing up in it, but from an 18-year-old, I was immersed in that subculture. And that language became so common to me, prayer for healing and faith, the prayer of faith shall save the sick. All those things were just a second language to me. And we never stopped to consider what that sounded like to an outsider, how foreign those words and ideas were to someone who came from where you were coming from. It's fascinating to see that from your angle.
Absolutely. I've had so many. I mean, can I tell you one more anecdote along those lines? This is another anecdote I've written about here and there. But when my oldest daughter was in like second or third grade in California, maybe they still do, but there was like a California mission requirement that every kid in the California schools had to do a little project on the mission near them. It's about California history, Spanish missions, right?
Oh,
so these are up and down the California coast. Spanish missionaries planted these missions to, spread the faith and do all their evil. And so but they're beautiful, these missions in San Juan Capistrano. They're all up and down the coast, and they're wonderful historical sites. So we put my daughter and my younger daughter, who at the time was maybe in kindergarten, into the car, and we drove 15 miles to the San Gabriel mission to fulfill her school project. And she had to like make a little model of it. And then we were going to have dinner afterwards, right? There's awesome Chinese food in the San Gabriel Valley. It's amazing. So we go into this mission, and it's a beautiful old adobe building, but there's many compartments, so we go into the first antechamber, the first room, and there it is. We're in a Catholic Spanish, and about 2 minutes in, my younger daughter, Flora, just screams bloody murder and bolts out. And I was like, your kids' cries, like there's different kinds of cries. This sounded like I just got stung by a bee cry. Like it was like shit, what happened? I go running out, like, Flora, what's going on? And she's just bawling. She's like, why did you bring me here? Why did you bring me here? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, she's like, we're in a Spanish mission. It's Ruby's project. What? I'm not going in that room again. I'm like, what are you talking about? The entire room was adorned with plaster and wooden crucified Jesuses. Bloodied, Catholic, strung up, crown of thorns, pierced side. And, that to me, well, that's Catholicism, right? But to a child who's never been taught this, it was a torture chamber. It was blood and gore and pain and suffering on every, and it was like, talk about seeing religion as an outsider. Talk about the damage it does to kids. So, Yes, in a sense, I wasn't studying it in a sense, I was studying it a little bit like an insider, which has strengths and weaknesses. I was actually trying to tell the world, like, hey, this is what secular culture is all about. But again, it was the myth busting that really prompted me. So the point here was, I was so constantly hearing on the radio and TV that America's, God is where we get our morality. And if we abandon God, society will go to shit. If we stop praying, society will go to shit. If we stop going to church, like I just kept hearing that, especially when George Bush Jr. was reelected the second time. And everybody was like, oh, it was the moral voters. It was the values voters. And I'm like, values vote? Oh, only so if you're against women's reproductive autonomy, you have a value? Like if you're against gay marriage, you have a value? Yeah, you have shit values. You're a fucking unempathetic bigot. But anyway, and I was like, what are you talking about? So I simply said, oh, you got an independent variable, strength of religiosity in a society, and then you got a dependent variable, outcomes of societal well-being. Like, so are you saying if religiosity goes down, then societies fall apart? Let's test it.
Yeah.
Is easily testable. We can measure religiosity by strength of belief in God, frequency of prayer, church attendance, you name it. And we can just have multiple variables, and then we can measure well-being. What's their murder rate? What's their crime rate? What's their poverty rate? What's their starvation rate? How do they take care of the elderly, the children, the disabled, and boom. So I lived in Scandinavia because I knew these were among the least pious, least believing, least church-attending societies in the Western democratic world. And I also knew they had among the lowest crime rates, the best healthcare, the best education. I mean, these are the safest, most humane, most moral societies. So that I was kind of grinding my axe. That's when I wrote Society Without God, and that was really my first foray into this area academically.
And that was back in what, 2008 or so?
2008, and then they did a second edition recently where we tried to update a lot of the statistics. Yeah.
Now, Genevieve, didn't you have a similar experience with the crucifixes and stuff? I saw your face blowing up.
I was going to say, I was getting all the deja vu because for one thing, I still have a CD somewhere that has all of my pictures from my Mission Dolores project, which I never really thought about how weird that was back then.
Yeah.
Because like I said, my parents are both staunch atheists. I never went to church, but I went to a private school that was a theater school in a building that used to be a boys' Catholic school.
Okay.
And so there was a church right across the street. And as a theater school, we would put on like really big performances, like a dozen times a year. And so our Christmas performance was in the Catholic church across the street. And it was my first time visiting a church. I was like 6 or 7 years old. And I walk in and it is fucking terrifying. It is like full color. Like I've seen statues of sad people. I've never seen like a full body, like colored, all red, just like tortured Jesus just staring at you. And it was terrible. And then
it's a blood cult. Yeah.
It is a death cult.
Crazy. And even, Catholic churches are really ornate. The pillars in the center of this chapel, they all had this crown molding where instead of it being like dentile or egg and dart or something, it was just tortured faces in agony all next to each other, just staring down in the pews. And I looked at my mom and I was like, Mommy, I'm really scared right now. Can we go? And she said, I know, honey, they do it on purpose. We'll just get in and get out and go home.
They do it on purpose.
They do.
They want to scare you. Yeah, it's fear. It's fear and control.
And it works.
Thank you, Wonder. She, her, for your $4 super sticker. Thank you so much for your support. I want to talk a couple of things, Phil. One thing I want to focus on, you're writing about morality and what it means to be moral. If there's one thing that I've heard ad nauseum from too many Christians since I've been an atheist is, where do you get your morals if you don't believe in God? How do you know? As an atheist, there's no right and wrong. You can do anything. You can steal, you can rob, you can rape, you can pillage. In fact, the only thing keeping me from doing that as a Christian is the fear of God. I want to tell that person, yes, please keep believing for all of our sake. But where does this, speak to that argument, Phil? It's asinine, I know. But when the Christian says you can't have morality without God, what's the right answer? What's the right response to that?
Yeah, I hear it all the time. I would say, well, how do you define morality? I define it as uh, trying to alleviate unwanted suffering, trying to make the world a more just place, helping people who need the help, and trying to make things more fair. Is that what you mean by morality? And that kind of throws them. Or they'll say, yeah, sure. And I say, oh, so you're asking me what makes me want to do that?
Hmm.
Oh, I know what it's like to suffer. I have something called empathy. I have something called compassion. Perhaps you don't. And so this is mysterious to you. Maybe you're a psychopath and the suffering of others, doesn't penetrate you. But if you know what it's like to feel pain, hunger, to be lied to, you understand the consequences of that. I get my morality from basically four sources. I get my morality from the kind of brain I have, which has evolved in a social context to allow me to feel what others are feeling to a certain extent, to understand misery, suffering, pain, and to care about it. I get my morality from the society and culture and that raised me, the people that surrounded me, the people that taught me right from wrong. They weren't maybe correct about everything, but they were correct about a lot of things. And I get my morality from observing how the world functions. I watch causes and consequences. I see what causes suffering and what causes happiness. And I get my morality from thinking about things and pondering and reflecting on these things. And then if they say, well, anything's wrong or right, blah, 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 I say, correct. We're just spinning on a ball in space and we have to figure this stuff out. And in the past, people thought X was okay. And we no longer think that. Thank goodness. In fact, if you believe morality comes from a magical invisible being, then actually whatever that magical invisible being says is right or wrong. So there's actually no basis. If that God says kill your son, the moral thing to do is kill your son. Do you think that would you kill your son if God told you to? Would you kill 1,000 babies if God told you to? How many people would you shoot if God kept demanding you to do it? Every last human being? I mean, it's really through the looking glass. There's something upside down here. But I also would acknowledge that yes, it's scary. We live in a society where wrong and right has to be thought about, argued about, debated. It's not written in the sky in golden letters. And we are adults now.
No, it's written on stones and golden tablets.
Exactly.
So I want to invite people to call in and talk to you about this. 217-375-9933 is the number. I do see a question in the chat that I wanted you to speak to, Phil. Does Phil believe in moral absolutism or moral relativism?
Yeah, those are loaded terms and they mean a lot of things. So I would have to ask more questions. Like you would need to define each of these. Philosophy is sort of the art of clear thinking. I'm not a trained philosopher, but I have learned that definitions are crucial.
Mm-hmm.
So let me say what I mean. Moral is an adjective. If I say that was not very moral of you, or you're not being moral, it's an adjective. I'm trying to describe something or someone or some action. All descriptive terms, if I say beautiful, if I say smart, if I say courageous, have to have a context in order for them to have any meaning. And they're subjective. There's no absolute objective definition of beautiful. In fact, the whole point is that if there were, it wouldn't mean what we mean it to mean. There's no absolute objective meaning to tall. It's all relative. What is tall? What is small? And so what I would say is, when I say moral, this is what I mean.
Right.
I mean someone who is alleviating or trying to alleviate suffering, trying to create justice and fairness in society, trying to treat people the way they would want to be treated. Is that relative? Absolutely. It's not objective. It is absolute. There's no absolute objective source of morality. In fact, I wouldn't even understand what that would look like. And even if there was, one could still ignore it. I'm not a moral relativist in that I say anything goes. I'm not a moral relativist that where I say, well, if your culture chops up people's genitals, that's fine. I'm not a moral relativist that says, well, if you think it's funny to burn animals for entertainment in your culture, that's fine. Not at all. But I can unpack. So I'm not a moral relativist in that, oh, anything is fine. No, I'm against unwanted suffering, and I don't give a shit what culture it's happening in. And I will do what I can to stop it, whether that's persuasion, whether, so on and so forth.
So the difference, I mean, there's obviously going to be a difference. I'm thinking of my evangelical pastor brother and other people from that world from which I came. They would look at morality differently from me. They would say that it's immoral for a woman to have an abortion. I would say it's immoral to prohibit a woman from having that choice. So we have to define what our morality means, and it's going to mean different things for different people. That's what you're saying.
It's going to mean different things for different people. That doesn't mean we throw up our hands and say different folks for different, different strokes for different folks. We have to still engage.
Right.
If I want to circumcise my son and someone else says, no, that is unnecessary suffering that you're imposing on a child, we have a debate now.
Right.
And in Scandinavia, you can't do it. They say it's immoral. But in San Francisco or the United States, it's considered moral. And to not allow Jews and Muslims to do that to their sons is considered a violation of their free religious rights, and that would be immoral. So the difference is morality ambiguous, difficult, gray, and never fully solved? Yes. Or do you think morality is some set of clear, obvious rules that are eternal? If you do, you're living like a child. I mean, actually deep problems with the God creates morality. There's I could walk us through them that they don't hold up. But so what I would say to your pastor or anybody, I would say, wow, I believe that you think abortion is immoral because it's taking a life. That's a fair, good faith argument. Now let's discuss why I don't see it the way you do. Why I don't see this zygote or fetus as a full-blown person. And we're going to have that uncomfortable. I think the reason the abortion debate is so tough is because it's clearly it's not like now you're a human. I think we all agree that a 9-month pregnancy is that baby's viable, and it's but a 3-week, a 3-month, it's very messy. And what I would try to, I don't want to get into the abortion debate, but I think there's a lot of good moral reasons to support women's bodily autonomy. I think it alleviates suffering. I think we can look at other societies that do and don't allow for abortion, and we can see what kind of suffering ensues. There's also abuse of it. I mean, I have read about what has happened in Russia and China on their abortion front, and some of it has scared me. But I think the point is secular people, and social psychology shows this in their research, are much more comfortable with ambiguity and navigating that. Religious people tend to they like blinders, and they want to know this is wrong, this is right. I can't deal with uncomfortable, and morality is the most inexact thing in the world.
Yeah. That's one of the interesting things when discussing the origins of morality with somebody who is religious, because I always I wonder, and Dave, maybe you can shed some light on this for cradle atheists like ourselves. How is that really all encompassing for all of the different situations in which there is moral ambiguity? Like the Bible says a lot about do's and don'ts, but it doesn't really have an answer to the trolley problem. Like, you know what I mean? There are so many situations that it doesn't address because it was written thousands of years ago. So I always wonder how one can make the argument that we derive our morality from God and God says so in this book, but then it leaves so much out.
Tons.
Well, as a former evangelical, Bible-believing Christian, believing that the Bible was the literal word of God, inerrant, inspired by the Holy Spirit, all those things, I did believe that. And it is nonsensical to look back now and think that a book written by goat herders in the Bronze Age could speak to the ambiguities of modern life. And yet they, and I also did, continue to try to force fit that book into modern culture. And it is, you use the term, Phil, childish thinking. It is very childish. In fact, that's why I titled my memoir Childish Things,
Mhm.
based upon a scripture in First Corinthians. I put away childish things when I became a man.
Mhm.
And the childish things I put away was that binary black and white thinking. But
Mhm.
that is what that culture trades in. It has to be black and white. It has to be good and evil. There has to be a villain and a hero, and God has to defeat Satan. All of that is childish, immature thinking.
You know, it's I agree. Eric Fromm wrote a book called Escape from Freedom back in the 50s. He wasn't talking about religion per se. He was trying to talk about authoritarianism, Hitler, Mussolini, fascism. And he said, and the title was called Escape from Freedom. And his thesis was everybody thinks they want free. We always say in America, like, we're the land of the free. He goes, actually, freedom is terrifying. Freedom requires responsibility. It
Yeah,
requires that you may make some decisions that are wrong and you suffer the consequences. And in fact, it's scary to be a responsible adult. Like, shit rests on you. When my wife had a stroke, holy shit, we had 3 kids and everything was on my shoulders.
right.
Everything. And it's like, it's easier to be a child on some level. Like, you miss out, you don't become a fully functioning human, but at least someone's making decisions for you. And I
Yeah.
think many humans, and I don't say this judgmentally, I think it's just a fact, many humans prefer this comfort and security of someone telling them what to do, whether it's a pastor, a rabbi, a priest,
100%.
a God. And, but it doesn't hold up when we get to morality. I'll just quickly walk you through it, right? If you think morality comes from God, there's multiple problems. Number one, no one can agree on what this God is urging. Like, fine, God, all right, let's accept that there's a God who tells us how to be and what's wrong and what's right. Why can't we all agree on those things? There's such division and
Right.
so then it becomes a matter of interpretation, right? Then it's just like, well, my interpretation over your interpretation. Now we're just debating again. Let's just cut out God and just have that debate. Next, even if we say, okay, fine, we all agree, somehow we're all getting the same email from God every morning, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Now that reduces morality simply to obedience. We are no longer functioning conscious beings
Yep.
who care about the feelings or experiences of others. We're simply saying, yes, sir. And we know that obedience is actually an abdication of our moral responsibilities. That's why you saying I was just following orders no longer holds up in a military court. If your sergeant tells you to kill those Vietnamese kids, you can't just say aye, aye, sir, right? We all have to own that. But religion says, no, you don't. You just follow orders. And then even if we said, fine, there's a magical being for which there's no evidence, but let's just say there is, and we can't understand, we can't agree on what he wants us to do, but let's say we all do, and now we all agree just to follow this orders. That doesn't make it moral.
Right.
As the Euthyphro dilemma unpacked over 2,000 years ago in the Socratic dialogue written by Plato, all that tells us is God makes commands. It doesn't make those commands moral, because the minute you say those commands are moral, you're judging God's commands from an outside perspective. What do you mean they're moral? Why are they moral? Well, because God commanded them. So they're moral, it becomes a tautology. So all you can say is God commands things. The minute you add the adjective moral, you're creating a sort of non-God measuring stick by which you're. So anyway, it doesn't hold up. Now, if it makes people live better lives, fine. If it helps, it makes them donate to charity more and it makes them volunteer more, I'm okay with that. But I think it's brittle. I don't think it's durable, and it certainly can't help us face the challenges we face right now, like gun violence, like climate crisis, like the United States won't be a democracy anymore in 3 years. I mean, talk about morality. Nowhere in the Old or New Testament is democracy ever mentioned or uttered. Democracy
Right.
is a secular idea. It has nothing to do with God, nothing whatsoever. So, yeah. Anyway.
Well, those are all incredibly good points. And the sad reality is, and we've had folks on this show, Genevieve, and we've talked to them who literally will tell you if God commands it, then it's moral.
Mhm.
And we've questioned them about genocide. So it's okay for God to author genocide. Well, God has his reasons. If
Right.
that's what he wants to do,
Mhm.
who can question God? If God tells you to kill your son, we had a guy, we literally asked him, if God told you to kill your son, you would do it? Yes, I would.
It's amoral. It's
It's
amoral.
insane.
It's evil. And so that, I believe it's a case of projection. I believe that at root, fundamentalists on some level sense that they have no moral compass whatsoever. And so they project that onto atheists. You don't have any morality. Are you kidding me?
Right.
And in fact, you don't even need to argue about it philosophically. Let's get back to sociology. All you have to do is look at societies that, okay, you can look at societies and what has happened as they become more secular. Their daily violence has plummeted. Now, is that because they become secular? Probably not. It's probably because they have good education and housing and healthcare and established democracies. But that's the point. There are secular alternatives. There are non-theological reasons. That's all that we have to prove. If you look at the United States, look at the states that have the highest rates of belief in God and church attendance and the lowest rates of church and God attendance. Where's the higher murder rates? Where's the highest domestic violence? Where's the highest poverty rates? You can even do it by county. You can say county by county. Counties that have highest God belief, prayer, church attendance, and the lowest. And the crime rates are through the roof in the most pious counties. Now, again, I'm not trying to reduce it to this one correlation and causation. I'm simply saying it's easy to debunk the notion that our morality comes from God. Look at Japan. Japan has no history of Christianity whatsoever. We're talking 0.01% of Japan has ever been Christian. They have the lowest murder rates on planet Earth, and they're a functioning democracy. So something else is giving them their morality, and it certainly ain't a God who executes and tortures his own son and sends you to hell if you don't love him.
So I want to pose a question to you about these secular societies and lack of crime and happiness and happiness quotients and things like that have been studied. One thought I've had is this, and I want you to speak to it, Phil, if you can. Looking at Christian America, especially as you mentioned, the places in this country that are the most religious, looking at fundamentalism in particular and evangelicalism, the core message in these faith iterations is this: you are born a sinner and you have to have a savior in order to be saved and escape hell and go to heaven. That's oversimplified, I know. But how likely is it, Phil, if a society at large has it drilled into them from birth that they're bad? How likely is it that they're going to act down to that? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think is there
Yeah.
something to that?
In
other words, if
you bet.
I'm told as a kid that I'm a rotten human being, and then I don't get the education I need, and I don't have the socioeconomic steps that I need to get out of poverty and ignorance and so on and so forth, how likely is it that I'm just going to say, what the fuck? I'm bad anyway. I'm just going to go rob that 7-Eleven. Fuck it. Is there something to that?
I think there is. It's not my area of expertise. It's really social psychology at that level. But I think you're basically talking about the power of the stories we tell ourselves and the power of the stories we tell our children. And if we tell our children you're dirt, we know children will have low self-esteem.
Right.
There was, remember that old poem? It was like children live what they learn or something. I used to see it in classrooms and on people's refrigerators. Like, if children live with praise, they become self-confident. If children live with ridicule, they become this or that. So yeah, I think there's definitely, if you tell children that they are evil at root, and only this bloody Jesus can save them, I think there's going to be cultural and psychological and sociological repercussions to that. Now, I don't think that's the only factor. I don't think it's the strongest, but you bet. Absolutely.
I mean, the prison population is overwhelmingly identified as Christian. I mean, if you poll the most prison populations, they're 90% identify as Christians. Yeah.
Atheists are dramatically underrepresented in our prison populations. But, I think there's more factors at play, primarily poverty.
Yeah.
And that's
poverty and lack of education. And
that's what's driving both. That's what's driving the criminal, the finding themselves incarcerated, and also their strong religiosity. And look, when life is hard, you're going to turn to God. I mean, very few people would have the wherewithal not to. Yeah. But in societies that have decent democracies with not a lot of chaos, low crime rates, great health care for everybody, housing for everybody, education for everybody, child care, elder care. What you see is that type of religious fundamentalism just is, it's like light to rodents. Like it just dissipates.
Yeah.
And religion still might be a part of one's ethnicity or coming of age rituals. You might still have a confirmation and get a bunch of presents or whatnot. But that kind of I need God to get through the day, it's just non-existent, and they just don't buy it anymore. And on a certain level, I have to think that I think there are some deeply good faith religious folks who really believe what they're saying, but on another level, it's working hand in hand with some kind of conservative agenda to keep, they don't want to subsidize any of these things. They don't want to tax the wealthiest Americans to pay for social services and healthcare and education. They want to destroy public education. And so it's playing out in multiple ways, and I think with multiple agendas. But what I don't understand is parents who can look at their children and see them as evil. I just don't get that. Like, okay, I've only had 3 kids. It's a sample of 3. But I saw my children as just beautiful, curious, loving, sweet, caring. I mean, my kids were upset by suffering very early on. Very early on. If they saw, I remember if I got mad at my older daughter, my younger daughter, before she could even walk, was like, dude, don't yell at my sister. Like there's and we have research on that. Paul Bloom's research at Yale on the infant studies, like infants have a natural tendency to hate badness. They can show them puppet shows and they don't like the mean puppet who steals things, and they like the nice puppet. Even pre-verbal children have that. So the fact that evangelicals and strong Christians and they look at their children like, you're born evil. You are evil. I'm just like, wow, what kind of hatred do you have for your children on some level? And it's sad, really, but
yeah,
I don't get it. I just don't. And what's even worse is it's the most successful popular religion the world has ever known. So it's clearly speaking to some psychological need. The 2 most successful religions on planet Earth are Christianity and Islam. And they both have a angry, mean daddy God who sends you to hell. Like, and people hear this and they're like, yes, makes sense to me. It's like, that's a little weird to me that humans, not just, the world over, they hear this story and they're like, yes, I believe it. So it's clearly speaking to some deep psychological, I'm going to say, dysfunction in our psyches.
Well, some serious self-hatred and anger.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a root there that it taps into. You're right. It's tapping into something, and it's not healthy.
What they don't want to hear is, hey, we need to get together and rationally solve our problems so that we all can live a good life. That somehow, you go to my Quaker church, my Silent Friends Quaker church here in Claremont, which is doing nothing but sitting quietly for an hour and then talking about how are we going to help the homeless in our community, right? They're getting 50 people on 40, 30 on a Sunday morning.
No mega church there, right?
Yeah, no. It's not speaking to people. But,
no.
But you go to the mega church in Orange County, that's, Trump's our savior, and we're all sinners, and we need God and AR-15s. I mean, I don't understand how you study the New Testament and love guns. Like, am I reading a different Bible? Am I reading a different Jesus here? Like,
they cast that out.
I mean, at best, I've come to bring a sword. Fine, be for swords. But AR-15s, you're going to love Jesus, the Prince of Peace, who said, don't resist evil, and you're going to love guns. It just tells you it just illustrates the moral depravity here among that segment of our population.
Yeah, it's troubling. So as a secular studies professor and sociological observer, speaking to this country and where it's at as a Christian nation, we do see the incredible drive toward Christian nationalism, Christofascism, I call it, where the players are truly wanting this to be a Christian nation, and many of them will stop short. Well, they won't stop short of that. What do you see, Phil? Give us a glimmer of hope here. What's coming down the pike for us in the next decades?
Oh man. Okay, I'm just going to make a quick addendum. I think what they really want is white Christianity. I think
Oh,
that's
yeah,
really important.
100%.
I think in many ways Christianity is a proxy for white supremacy. But that aside, you want some hope.
Yeah, I'd
All
like
right,
some.
let me give you some hope. Here we go. Ready? All right,
Genevieve, do you want some? I'm
here we
worried.
go.
Use
I've
some.
Here we
I've
go.
got a terminal disease. I'm not going to be here very many more years. I'm worried
Okay.
about my Genevieves and my kids
Here,
and
yeah.
grandkids.
Here's where. All right, I'm going to give you some hope. Okay. Here we go.
Thank you.
I'll do my best. So what we know is that the real engine, or I shouldn't say a major engine of religious reproduction. Let me rephrase that. One of the things that keeps religion alive is what we call socialization. Families socializing their children to be religious. We know that the vast majority of children know what they are before they even know what that entails. They learn that they're Muslim or Protestant or Catholic or Jewish or Episcopalian. Like, this is my team. And they get socialized into that identity by the people who are taking care of them. And that's very powerful. If the people that are taking care of you tell you this is true, this is who you are, this is what to believe, what 4-year-old or 6-year-old or 12-year-old can resist that? It's very difficult. So socialization is a major process here. What we know is that when parents are non-religious, their children tend to be non-religious as well, like 85% of the time. If both parents are of the same religiosity and the same religious identity, the likelihood of their child being that religion is very, very high. If it's two parents, both religious but different religions, mom's a Catholic, dad's a Protestant or whatever, the child's probably going to be religious, but less so. If one parent is secular and the other's religious, it's now at 50% likelihood. And if both parents are secular, 85% of the time, that child will stay secular as well. So I'm setting something up here.
Okay.
The rates of Americans who are non-religious is exploding. It is a demographic firework. So
Hallelujah.
yeah. So when I was born in 1969, fewer than 4% of Americans said they had no religion. When given lots of options, they could take Lutheran or Mormon or whatever. They chose none of the above. And that's pretty powerful because many people will have at least a kind of familial association with the religion, even if maybe I haven't been to church in 20 years, but sure, I'm Lutheran, or sure, I'm Catholic. They think of their parents, their grandparents. So to tick none, None, is a pretty strong statement of secular identity. Now we are at about 30% on average, 1 in 3. If we go to the 18 to 29-year-olds, we're at 45, 46%. Ryan Cragen just sent me data today on that. So
Really?
we are seeing this. That's just in the United States. Forget places like Scotland, Czech Republic, Uruguay, Japan, South Korea, like huge. We now have majority societies on planet Earth where more people than not are atheists, agnostics, or secular. So here in the United States, so far that's identification is going up, secular, but also non-belief, atheism, agnosticism, these are also going up. So what we're going to expect is that those people, when they have children, those kids are probably going to not be religious as well. So we're seeing a huge cohort. We see this in Canada, like through the roof. We're seeing a huge chunk of Americans who are not believing. Secondly, I just got the data. I could screen share it with you. Strong belief in God, like I believe in God and have no doubts, is plummeting in this country in the last 40 years. So a majority of Americans still say they believe in God, but if you press them and say, okay, of these options, I believe in God absolutely with no doubts, or I believe in God, but I have some doubts, or I think I believe in God, but I'm not sure, and so on and so forth. The rate of people strongly believing in God without any doubts is going down. Church attendance rates, or weekly church attendance rates are going down. Like almost every measure I've ever seen, we're seeing secularization occur in the United States. Why is that good news? On the flip side of that is secular Americans are more moral politically. They are more moral when it comes to climate crisis, women's rights, children's welfare, education, animal welfare, guns. You just go down the list, LGBTQ rights, civil rights, Black Lives Matter, whatever the issue, the more secular Americans take the moral position. So what I would say to you is the demographics are on our side. The trends are on our side. And the younger Americans, when Donald Trump held up that Bible in front of that church while he was tear gassing peaceful protesters, that probably did more to damage that brand than Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and Richard Dawkins combined. Like,
Yeah.
all my young students, my 18-year-olds, my 19-year-olds who care about LGBTQ rights, who care about climate crisis, who don't like having student debts, they know, they see that the DeSantis's and the Tucker Carlsons and all these right-wing fucks are adorning themselves in crucifixes, and it's not good for Christianity. And I feel terrible for the progressive Christians that actually do try to live by Jesus' ethical codes, because their brand is getting trampled. But what the Soviet Union did for atheism's brand, that's being forgotten, because my students don't even know what the Iron Curtain is anymore. But what Trump and his soldiers, his Christo-white fascists, are doing to the Christian brand is very obvious. And I think it's not going to go well for Christianity's sake. And I do believe that secular values are on the rise.
I see those numbers, and I don't disagree with you. Why is it that so much of what we see, though, the people in power are of that opposite trend? The Congress, the Supreme Court is a great example. We've got 5 of the 9 who are, well, almost 6 of the 9 who want a Christian nation, essentially.
Christo-fascists. Well,
yeah. So why is it that the people in power seem to be, is that just the last stand kind of thing, you think? Or what are we seeing there?
It is interesting that you see this decline of Christianity and yet this actual upsurge of power. Like,
exactly.
Trump White House was the most evangelical White House in the history of our nation. And I mean, the whole 200 plus years. I do think it's a little bit of a last gasp. I also think it has to do with where the money flows, and it has to do with a decision that was made back in the 80s by some very savvy people who saw that there was this chunk of white evangelicals, 25, 30%, who were easily mobilizable over issues of white supremacy and abortion. And some Republicans somewhere said, that's our demographic, let's go for them. And the Republican Party simply married in a beautiful wedding the religious right, and that gave us our political landscape today. And that Trump is, I would, if I had to bet, I think Trump's an atheist. I don't think he
100%.
But he has catered to them and their white fantasies, and I think the rest is the Electoral College. I blame the Electoral College. If we just had a popular vote like every other fucking democracy, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But the Electoral College, which was implemented to keep slavery going, by the way, is the root of it.
Yeah. I think you're right, Phil. I hope you're right. I think that and as these old guard politicians die off, younger ones like Beto O'Rourke, others who have true thinking, progressive thinking about them, Pete Buttigieg, those kind of people are going to rise up, and it's just going to take some time. And it's discouraging because I'd like to see it quicker, but it's just going to take some time.
Yeah. It is frustrating. I mean, but even when you take religion out of it, it's just the conservative voting bloc has essentially been holding our democracy hostage because we have such disproportionate representation. Absolutely. Popular vote. Oh, yeah, it would not even be a question because there are so many more progressive people in this country. But on top of the structure just favoring conservative rural areas and states, I think a lot of this pandering does have to do with the fact that old religious people vote and younger people really don't.
You're absolutely right.
Of course, that power is going to be disproportionate.
And they have I agree with you, Genevieve. And they're like I said, they're easily mobilizable. Secular people are not joiners. You can't just say, oh, the secular vote goes this, even though there is one, there's no phone trees where you can just go to the congregation, but you can disseminate your political agenda to church after church, to denomination and they have everything's in place, all the networks, all the emails, so that's a disadvantage, but I think you're right. I think they're actually anti-democracy. I think the Republicans and conservatives, they don't want government by the consent of the governed. They don't want people. I mean, if you really wanted people to choose their own leaders, you would have a week of voting. You would have voting be a holiday. You would have votes on Saturdays and Sundays. You would have mail-in ballots. They want to restrict voting as much as possible so that only retired white religious Christians in northern Minnesota can vote. so they
Yeah.
can stay in power.
True.
Catching up on some super chats here. Kelly Laughlin, good to see you back. Love you all. Thank you for your support there. Toy Ranch, this might be worth talking about. Thank you for your super chat. Very generous. Given that so many conspiracy theorists are also Christians, why does nobody think Satan is the good guy and the one who is a genocidal maniac that commands your love is actually the bad guy? Seems more defendable than flat earth or 5G or Ouija board. Good points. And Wonder She Her, $20. Thank you. It was so confusing as a kid learning all the Catholic rules and the law of the land. Which one do you follow when they contradict? Like thou shalt not kill, but it's okay in war. Yeah, that's a good point.
Good one.
And DD Super Sticker, thank you again for your support. Yeah.
And
Good comments.
I did see in the chat that I did misspoke. The pronunciation is die.
Die. Well, I followed
Die
your
Die,
lead, Genevieve.
I know. I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting us, Die. I always hate mispronouncing people's names. I get it all the time, so I feel it.
We have Greg wanting to talk to you, Phil. So we got a call. He's one of our faithful guys. Greg, him in Missouri. How you doing, brother? Are you there, Greg? Oops.
There you
There we
I'm
go.
here now.
There
Hello.
you are. Hello, Greg.
Yeah, good. Hey, yeah, it's good to see you back. I just want to, and I think I've made this comment on the show before, but I'll make it again because it seems like it fits with what you're talking about really well right now. And I'll make this short, but I just feel like there's this race between the secular community and our allies, meaning, religious folks, but ones who live their religion and believe in the same types of morality with the rest of us. So there's, us, and then on the other side, the Christo-fascists. And I just think there's a race between them being able to lock down power and have their legislatures completely void out their elections in their states. Between that and then us becoming so big, the numbers of us becoming so large that we overwhelm them and we finally vote them out of power. And I just think it's this race. And yes, what frustrates me is we do have the numbers, and I don't mean just secular, the nuns. I mean our allies too. The religious folks that I disagree with on the one issue about God, but I agree with 99% of everything else they say. But we're on this one side. We are a majority, and somehow we have to wrestle away this power from these people who are superstitious.
Yeah. I will definitely say. I mean, just really quickly, before I totally lose my train of thought. I mean, something that we kind of touched on earlier, is that there is this entire network on the right where they have this great coalition of unity. But the other thing too is that when you have like a black and white perspective on the world, and when you are just solely following whatever this person says, whatever my pastor says, I'll do. Whoever he says to vote for, I will do. If you tell me who is a Christian, I will vote for them. There's no nuance. And like, even though a vast majority of people in this country do not align with the conservatives, the Christian nationalists, or the Republican Party at large, we do see nuance. And so oftentimes we are having debates. There's a lot of discussion that goes on before there's that unity. And so the race for power between these Christian nationalists and the people who are on our side, I think that until we see a more organized and united coalition, and until we can at least put aside some of the larger discussions, until we get everybody at least just stopping the bleeding on our democracy. Like, it's a code blue situation. I will absolutely go back to having those nuanced discussions of the different things that we should do on the left or on the liberal side. But right now it's just, can we please just make sure that we never get a Donald Trump or a Republican president who is a Christo-fascist and a white nationalist ever again. That would be great. Thoughts?
Well, and as Matt Dillahunty says, and I don't think he made it up. I think he borrowed it from others. But the good is the enemy of the perfect, or the perfect is the enemy of the good, depending which way you look at it. And yeah, and I agree with you totally. There's this person, and maybe there's one issue where, like, I wish they, well, like Joe Biden, there's Joe. I like Joe, but there's so many things I wish he would better on. But you know what? He wasn't Trump. And he's done an okay job, not great, but an okay job while he's been in there. So, I'm gonna vote him out. I'm gonna him out because he didn't do it all. Well, let's grow up. That's not the way it works.
Well, Trump got elected initially because too many people just didn't like Hillary. I knew many of them personally who just would not vote for her, and he won by default. Didn't win the popular, but won the electoral college. But I think this speaks to the point we made earlier, Phil, about the binary nature, the black and white thinking of the fundamentalists. And I know many Christians who were single issue voters, still are, and they vote for. I use my family, for instance. They're good, moral people who still voted for probably the most openly immoral presidential candidate we've seen in our lifetime, because they knew that he would deliver the Supreme Court that he did, which would strike down Roe v. Wade, which it did. That was the single issue they were voting for. So they were willing to hold their nose and vote for Donald Trump because they felt like, and he did deliver, that he would give them what they wanted, which was an end to abortion, which they saw as the single most important issue. Is that, again, it's back to not looking at morality in nuanced terms. It's black and white, good and evil, abortion bad, pro-life good. The pastor says, I have to vote this way, so I'm going to vote this way. Is that pretty accurate in your view, Phil?
Wow. I think there's a lot going on there as to what would make someone a single issue voter on the issue of abortion. I think it's actually pretty deep, because if you think about it, that position asks nothing of you.
Exactly.
You don't have to feed that fetus. You
Nope.
don't have to educate that fetus. You don't have to make sure that fetus has clean air and clean water. You don't have to make sure that fetus has a safe schoolroom to go to. You have nothing. There's no obligation to that fetus. You don't have to pay taxes to make sure it has food and shelter. You do nothing.
It's the easiest, quote unquote, moral stance you can take.
Exactly. So I think something else is going on there. Because if those same people were the ones demanding free health care for all children under the age of 18, and demanding free dental care, and demanding free eye care, and demanding the best schools and child subs care, like, hey, I would think, wow, these people are moral. But because now we're all hypocritical, we're all inconsistent. I don't like to charge others with hypocrisy. We all have our hypocrisies.
Sure.
Someone could just as easily say, well, Phil, you eat chicken, but you don't eat cows. So, guilty is charged. But on this issue, I think something else is going on. I think that abortion stance is a proxy for something else. I don't quite know what it is.
It's control.
It's control of women.
It's control, because these are white men who are pushing this agenda. And I saw it in the comments, this men wanting women to be under their submission.
But we got to remember, a lot of women are pro-life too. Like, this is the weird thing. My students are always framing it as a kind of men versus women issue. And I say to them, there are way more women who are members of, Women for Life than there are women.
But they come from that evangelical strain, which teaches them that their proper place is under the authority of a man who's under the authority of God. Right. It's that hierarchy that they've been trained to buy into.
I agree.
And they work against their own interests. That's what's so maddening.
It is. I will say I'm am so far from a Christian in the sense that I don't think that people are inherently wicked or evil, and I do think that people who are on the right and people who are pro-life, I don't want to discount how much of this is just because they've been fed nothing but bullshit and misinformation.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Well, that's true.
That's
Yeah.
true. I mean, it's such a non-issue in most democracies on planet Earth. It is that I'm going to Denmark again. I go there all the time. They're
Take
just
me
like,
with you,
I wish.
please.
I mean, you know what? The food's not so great. The weather's pretty shitty, but they just can't understand the gun thing and the abortion thing. They're just like, what planet do you? What's going on there?
Oh, I just got back from overseas in Italy and Greece.
Oh, right.
To a person, when they learned I was from America, their question, they often were afraid to ask it. I remember meeting a couple of people from Sweden, and they were afraid to ask the Trump question. But when they kind of hinted and hedged, and then I finally I kind of figured out where they were coming from. I said, "Oh, he's a fucking moron," and they just went, "Yes, yes."
And you know, they care. I mean, they
Yes,
are
because
affected
they
by
know
it.
we influence the
The
world.
world. I remember I had friends and colleagues who their entire office spent the night in their office to watch the election results. You know, Hillary versus Trump. I mean, even Americans don't do that. You know, we're watching football and changing the channel. They were all so. It's very sad. I think he is going to win again, but I could be wrong. And I don't want to say that to you, Dave, because I know you wanted hope and optimism, but I that's my prediction. I wrote about it on Only Sky. If you go, I wrote a piece on why I think
I need to
Trump
read
will.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Only
think.
Sky's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope you're wrong.
I do
I
too.
mean, he won't win the popular vote again. So,
Oh, that's for sure.
unless he manipulates the other part, which he probably will. I don't know. I'm discouraged,
We got to
but
pray.
we got to pray. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
It's in God's
Pray
hands.
to Pan.
Pray to Pan.
He needs followers, man.
No.
He needs believers.
I can get on board with that. Hey, Bill Castle, super sticker.
the
Thank you,
beard.
brother. Hey, Greg, thanks for your call. We're going to let you go and wrap things up with Phil. But thanks, as always, for all your support and chiming in with your good questions, brother. See you, Greg.
Oh, sure. No problem. And I just want to challenge all the other folks out there watching the show. Call in sometime.
Call in.
Yeah.
Come on,
It's
call
not
in,
hard. It's not hard, is it,
know.
Greg? I don't know why they don't.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay, Greg. Thanks,
Bye,
buddy.
Greg.
Bye.
He's great. Phil, what's next on you before we let you go? We're about to run out of time here. What's next on your agenda? What are you working on another book? What are you doing?
Okay, I do have a new book coming out with Ryan Cragen and Isabella Castlestrand on secularization. So it charts all the data on how societies all over the world are becoming less religious in terms of behavior, belief, belonging. It's called Beyond Doubt, the Secularization of Society. That'll be out next year. I'm going to Kentucky Free Thought Day. I have never been to Kentucky. I can't wait. So that's September.
I saw
First Saturday in
that.
September. A lot of big names are going to be there. I'm really excited to participate. I've never, like I said, I've never been to Kentucky. I'm really.
You haven't missed anything.
That's so sad. I'm hearing that from a lot of people, but
no, listen, it's the cousin to Tennessee. It's in the. No, I saw that you were going to be there, and in fact, I was looking at going there myself. So maybe
I hope so.
Maybe we'll connect.
And then I'm really involved in Only Sky. It's a new media hub for America's secular Americans. It provides culture, politics, entertainment, news. So I write for Only Sky. I edit for Only Sky. So that's taken up a lot of my time. But I think I'm excited by it because it really is a broad platform covering everything: poetry, politics, animals, vegetables, minerals. You got it. And we got amazing contributors, podcasts, and so I'm not really, it is a plug, but I'm honestly just thrilled about it, and I'm putting a lot of time and energy into that. And other than that, just starting up a new semester here at Little Pitzer College. Starts next week, and I'm teaching a sociology of secularity class. We have a secular studies program here, so I'm excited to be teaching that class. And yeah, that's it for me. And what else can I tell you?
Yeah, I want to follow up with you maybe on the only guy. I can't remember the guy's name. At the American Atheist Conference, he had a table across the aisle
Oh,
from
yeah.
me.
Okay.
And I wanted to get him on the show and talk about Only Sky. So I may follow up with that.
Was it
And also,
Dale McGowan, maybe?
no, it wasn't Dale. I know who Dale
Sarah
is.
Levin? I don't wonder who it was.
I've got his card somewhere in my somewhere.
Marcus
Atangelo,
Johnson?
pardon?
Maybe it was Marcus Johnson.
I think so.
Okay.
Atangelo actually thinks he's going to get on this show and throw out his stupid shit. He's not.
Not. Also,
and
Jeffrey Dahmer was a Christian, Atangelo, so.
Oh,
Jeffrey
man.
Dahmer was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I want to come talk at your college.
That'd be awesome.
We may really follow up with you on that, because I did a few talks last year at college campuses, and it's absolutely my favorite thing to do.
Oh, I'd love to have you out
the
here.
Q&A with the kids, and we were at this one school in Eastern Tennessee, a secular school, by the way, and they put it out on their website that the Secular Student Alliance was bringing an atheist in to give a talk. I was talking about my book and I'll do a lot of talking about dying out loud, which is me as an atheist looking at a terminal illness and living and dying as an atheist. And so, amazing. Man, did the community get up and roar up in arms about the fact that this secular college was bringing an atheist onto their campus. Wow. I mean, my God, imagine.
Interesting. I would love to have you out. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, so that we may talk more about that, I love the Q&A on the college campus and the curiosity of the students and the enthusiasm and the energy. It just revs my engines. I just love it. It's my favorite place to speak. So
it's nice. Absolutely.
But Phil, you got a lot going on. Looking forward to that new book. I've been digging into a couple of your others. I love your writing style, and the subject matter is honestly, it is encouraging to know that the secularization of the culture is happening. We are on the right side of this thing, and I have to remind myself of that.
Absolutely.
We're on the right side of history. We're on the right side of societal movement. It is discouraging when the powers that be are trying to drag us back into the dark ages, but we have to keep plugging forward and moving forward.
That's right.
So we will definitely have you back on sometime when that book's out.
So much.
Next year. Genevieve, any final parting thoughts?
Oh, well, I never thought that I would be leaving a conversation about this subject feeling moderately hopeful. But I do.
You did. You gave us hope, Phil.
I know.
It's nice to hear. It was a pleasure to talk with you. You guys are doing great work. You're bringing so much light into the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Well,
thank you.
We hope we credit that to our amazingly loyal fans and the community that is kind of grown up around this show. We've been doing it almost a year now, Genevieve. Can you believe it?
I know. I was going to say our anniversary is coming up soon.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, Phil, good work. If I don't see you in Kentucky, I'll see you somewhere, I'm sure.
Sounds good.
And we'll be in touch. And, folks, thank you for tuning in. That's our show for tonight.
Awesome.